Hello everyone, hey, how's it going? It's me, Generic Pie, back with another video. This one is the Shadow version of my kind of guides to sucking less at War of the Ring. Um, if you've just stumbled across this video on YouTube, this is about War of the Ring, the board game that we play online via this Java client. We've got a great Discord server, lots of very keen, very good players. The standard is excellent on there, and this guide is based on my experience of losing lots of games online and me taking notes on why I lost said games. So it's going to be kind of a relatively long, rambling video of me going through some kind of lessons I learned and going through some of the instances in which I learned them. So yeah, here we go. So number one, misuse of Onslaught. Yeah, this is a card that I've had quite a tempestuous up and down relationship with since I've been playing War of the Ring. It's a very powerful card, very good card, but it's not a card for all purposes. You know, you certainly don't want to use it typically early on in a fight. All you're doing there is, you know, diminishing you're taking a big risk and taking a huge hit to your army that you may then need to finish off the remainder of the stronghold. So its best is used at the end of a fight when, for example, you're trying to take down Lorien or Erebor and you've got way too many troops and you just need to finish off one last unit, maybe two last units. Or if it's a close race and, you know, Strider is sprinting through Middle Earth and the hobbits are marching up Mordor, and you got to take some big risks, some big swings, because it's kind of an all or nothing card. I've seen players use it very effectively just by going for it, but it's a card that can really punish you if you use it in the wrong situations or you rely on it too much, I think. Because yeah, being a little bit patient can save you a lot of time. If a failed onslaught means you then have to, you know, recruit 3 more elites and send them marching to Lorien, because that's much slower. Right, number 2. Trying to force corruption strategy when the Fellowship is moving fast. In most games, Shadow Military is the way to go to win the game, unsurprisingly. But I think when I started playing online, I used to just go very hard military, which is probably still the right thing to do. Maybe I should go back to that. But there were certainly some games when I would feel that you know, the sprint would be too fast, and I'd look back and go, oh, maybe I should have gone for more corruption. But I think in most cases, you know, trying to go 50-50 is not the right play. You don't want to force corruption if it's just not going to happen. Because you then end up with the worst of both worlds. Many times you'll see the Fellowship rush through Middle Earth and then gets bogged down in Mordor because of, you know, Strider dies and then they're not down to Gollum yet, and then they stop rolling movement. Maybe they've used their eyes already, sorry, their rings already, and the Shadow can catch up. Like the way in which Shadow can if Shadow gets a good roll and some choice cards, the speed at which Shadow Military can just raise through the free people is sometimes astounding. So yeah, if you try and half put one foot in each lane, you just it often doesn't work too well. Equally, on the flip side, completely ignoring C cards to hurt Fellowship. I do, as I'm not. Others may disagree, but personally, I feel like if you do get an Orc Patrol or an Isildur's Bane or a Foul Thing from the Deep, it can be tempting to use those in combat. You know, Crawler's Death is a very powerful combat effect. But sometimes having that shot at revealing the Fellowship, whether it's usually most useful when they're just a few steps away and we're trying to get into Mordor, that kind of having the chance to throw one of those cards at the Fellowship can be game changing. And the game in which I'm thinking about this, I think I threw away one of those because I had a really stacked hand and I was just going I was just wholly focusing on strategy cards, and then the Fellowship was just too quick. And I just wished, if only I'd had that Orc Patrol just to have a go, have a swing at slowing them down. I mean, it might have still just been an eye. Those cards love to draw eyes, but yeah, as a slight kind of on the flip side of number 2, that's not for keeping one character card is not forcing corruption strategy. Just being tactful with your corruption if you're going hard on military. Number 4. I mean, this one is probably loads of experienced players made this mistake. Forgetting War Restore and Toil, I do it. I'm sure if you're watching this video, you've done it. Everyone does it. It's really annoying. And it can be game changing, you know. It can be hugely powerful to if you hit a Mithril Crown Sting or a Bilbo Song or maybe an Ent card or whatever, it can be just an incredibly powerful thing to miss. So look out for that little flashing card. Forgetting the Mouth. Everything I just said applies here. I've done it many times, even as an experienced player. Still forget him sometimes. And also don't forget that you can get him when all of the free people nations are at war. I got to do that in a game recently against Israel Day. It was very satisfying. Always nice to get an early Mouth. So yeah, don't forget the Mouth. Throwing away a tile drawing card when the Fellowship was sprinting. Okay, so this is actually what I must be referring to with 3. I'm guessing in this game I just completely was ignoring characters. But this is essentially the same point. Trying to find a way to gain a turn. Again, referencing Galahad B's excellent channel. He often thinks about the game in terms of how many turns will it take the Fellowship to get to Mordor, which is a useful thing to do whether you're the Free Peoples player or the Shadow player, because it kind of gives you a bit of a clock. You're thinking, okay, on average, how many moves are they going to be able to make this turn? Are they going to be able to get in next turn? If they're going to be able to get in next turn, is there a way that I can slow them down? Maybe it's through playing a tile drawing card. Maybe it's through use of, obviously Cruel Weather is the best way. But yeah, something to consider, because earning that extra turn can be really important. Okay, story time. This is one of the most painful losses I've ever had. It was against Mistaken Tuner, who's a really solid player, really decent player. But this was when Mistaken Tuner was quite new to the server. I think I joined maybe like 6 months or a few months before Mistaken Tuner. And at the time, I felt like I was a stronger player. Mistaken Tuner was kind of like still feeling it out online. And I was winning the game very comfortably as Shadow. Very comfortably. And Mistaken Tuner did like this absolutely like, frankly ridiculous free military attempt by charging Gandalf, using Through Day and Night from like Parth Celebrant, a Gandhi army in like Parth Celebrant or like Eastern Met, and charged into Mordor. It wasn't even that big. The army was not even that big. Like, it should have lost. By all objective measures, it was a suicide mission, and it should have lost Mistaken Tuner the game. But when you're desperate, you got to do these things, right? So got lucky here. Also got lucky in Gorgoroth when I attacked into it. I think I got like 1 on 0 hits with quite a strong card or something like that. And I ended up having to rely on a big stack, trying to take down like 3 units in Barad-dûr to stay in the game. And if I'd killed this army, I would have 100% won the game. There was no way back into the game for Mistaken Tuner. So, and this ties into number 1, misuse of Onslaught. I had an Onslaught and I had a Relentless Assault. And for some godforsaken reason, I thought that it would be better to use the Onslaught first rather than the Relentless Assault. But the thing is that, like, at least with a Relentless Assault, you're just rolling more dice to do the hits. Like, a Relentless Assault is sacrificing 2 dudes to roll on 4s, and then you at least get re-rolls. With an Onslaught, you're trying to roll on 6s, and then if you do like a big 4 and it flops, you're screwed. I mean, all I know is that like Relentless Assault was the correct play. I should have done that first, retained my army's size, so that then I could then measure how much of an Onslaught I needed to do. In classic, War of the Ring fashion, the Relentless Assault, I rolled a bunch of 4s when I would have used Relentless Assault, and then rolled like absolute trash on the Onslaught and ended up losing the fight and losing the battle. And yeah, fuck Onslaught. That was my sentiment at the time. But yeah, that one really, really stung and stayed with me for a long time. So yeah, that's a perfect example of when not to use Onslaught. Don't use it early on in the fight. When you have no character dice and loads of masters with a Witch King stuck, you should pivot to Rohan. Nothing to lose. Yeah, I mean, this is something I like to do in general. If you just have a load of muster dice, doing a massive Rohan charge up and then assault is a great thing to do. Yeah, I'm surprised this lost me a game. I don't know what I was doing with those musters elsewhere, because I mean it's a pretty obvious place to use musters, often mid game at least. Yeah, can be a good just blitzkrieg in with Orthanc into Helm's Deep, try and take out, at least get, hopefully you take over the whole of Rohan, but you can at least often take Helm's Deep, get those 2 victory points, and if Gandhi's not there, it's even better. Not taking a moment to consider ways to win the game, win at the end. Don't forget cities. Yeah, this is something, again, I think newer players do less often. Sometimes it might look like a game is unwinnable, or you're going to have to do some really unlikely charge on a very tough stronghold in order to win. But if you take a step back and look at the cities option, it's often much more feasible than you think. You know, a few choice musters in North Dunland. Obviously, if you have raided the Dunland things, you can get over to Shire. And Shire is often harder to defend, because if the North isn't at war, it's very, very tight. It's expensive for the Free People's player to defend it. These guys, you can't move them with character dice, obviously, so it's slow. You need 2 hybrids or wills to get these guys into the Shire. It's quite rare that you actually see these guys getting to defend, because it's always awkward for the Free People's player. So yeah, just don't forget cities. I think when I started going for cities, my win rate as Shadow improved quite a bit. Just using that keep having that in your arsenal. When Free People's military victory is a threat, fully defend. Don't half-arse it. Yeah. Definitely been a bit cocky in games where you think free military, oh, I can ride it out. But when it's like all or nothing, you gotta just give everything to defend. You gotta do everything within your power. You know, use all the strong cards. You know, do every way you can to get Nazgul in to defend. Yeah, don't just take it for granted that you're gonna survive and roll the dice will help you, because the Free People, you know, they have strong military offensive cards, and the Shadow has very few strong defensive cards, especially if there is a Gandalf in battle, because yeah, that just immediately deactivates half of your cards. Yeah, so that's something to be careful with. 11. Using a strong card just because you can, not because you should. Yeah, this is one I see a lot, and I think this can apply to quite a lot of cards. The one that springs to mind straight away is Shadow's Gather. I've seen it lots in games where someone will they want to use Shadow's Gather so badly, so they'll do some awkward thing here, and then they'll do Shadow's Gather from here to here, and then they'll leave one guy in Dagger Lad, or they'll shoehorn this army here and then do it up here. It often just it can just be quite clumsy, and when you actually add it up, you're not necessarily getting full value, because you know, if you're really having to shoehorn those cards, it can just not be hugely effective. I'm trying to think of other examples of cards. Let me just have a quick think. I mean, maybe it could be using maybe a Deadly Strife in a fight. We don't really need to use it. It could be using Grond, or fighting Uruk-hai in a battle where you probably shouldn't use it. I mean, a little bit like Onslaught, those are very dangerous cards to use against well-stocked armies, you know. If you're using Grond against a 1-2 in Lorien, in most cases, the most hits that army can do against you is 3 per round. It's unlikely they're going to get 3 hits per round, and if you have a 10 HP stack, you're still going to be alive at the end of it, if they have a perfect thing. But if you're up against a 1-3 or a 3-2 or a 2-3, they can get 5 hits on you multiple rounds in a row, and you're just trapped in this cycle of death. Like this is so many. I think, yeah, Witch King gets killed so often in that situation. So if you don't need to use Grond, like it's an easy way of losing a game that you're quite comfortably ahead in by taking a risk on Grond when you could have just like been a little bit more patient, maybe waited until the stronghold was a little bit weaker, or using on a different stronghold where you had a less of a threat. Yeah, just something to be wary of. Not leaving one Nazgul in certain armies to give them the option of moving on seeds. Yeah, so this can happen sometimes. You'll have like all of your Nazgul will be, you know, all in one army grouped up together. Let's say this army's here, and you've got all your Nazgai hanging out together, having a big party. And you're sitting on Lorien. But Lorien gets really, you know, they get Kellerborns and Power 2 Great, and you don't want to attack it or you can't attack it. But then you have a bunch of sea dice, and then you got this big army here that you want to move into Pelargir, but there's no leadership in it, and you're like, oh my god, that's so annoying. I'm going to have to use the sea dice to move all my leadership around again, and then use the sea dice to move into Pelargir. Like, it just, it can just be, maybe you only have one sea dice. One sea die. So, so yeah, leaving one Nazgul in just an army somewhere that you intend to move later on. This can be especially useful in late game when, you know, it's vital. Every half movement and movement counts massively when playing a Shadow. But especially in the late game when you're trying to just, you know, eke out every offensive possibility from every single half movement and character die. So, so yeah, that's a nice option. It's more effective once you've got more Nazgul on the board, obviously, and the Witch King's in play. But yeah, just as something to think about. Gambling on killing strong Dale over getting into weak Woodland Realm. Okay. Gambling on killing strong Dale over getting into weak Woodland Realm. So I'm guessing I attacked into a strong Dale when I could have just gone round the strong Dale and got into Woodland Realm. Yeah, just because Dale's here, you don't have to attack it. You can go around it. That seems pretty self-explanatory. Not prioritizing getting rerolls on Fellowship when you have the chance. Yeah, this is a really big one that I think a lot of newer players don't. Well, they either put too much stock in this or they don't put any stock in it at all. When I was a newer player, I didn't really prioritize getting rerolls on the Fellowship that much. But especially if the Fellowship's been hit at all in the early game, even if you're prioritizing military, it's not that hard just to get, like, you know, say the Fellowship's here in Dimrill Dale, you attack into Lorien and you leave behind the two guys, or you set up a little like Nazgul web so that wherever the Fellowship ends up going, they're gonna have to go into the one of these territories, and then like using the odd half move to like chase the Fellowship down, follow them wherever they're going. That can be extremely powerful, and in a game of fine margins, you've got to take every edge you can to get one over on the Fellowship, slow them down. You know, the amount of times that Nazgul, that second reroll or the one reroll hits a 5 or a 6, and you get an extra tile draw, and then maybe it's a reveal, maybe it kills Strider, maybe it means that you get an extra turn before the free people get into Mordor, the Fellowship gets into Mordor. So yeah, that's a really something to definitely not undervalue as a new player. Not playing your only attack the Fellowship card in combat. I think we've covered that. That would be referring to, again, like, I think I've basically written that 3 times in various forms. Obviously something that I feel strongly about. It's just, yeah, using all of the Orc Patrol, Isildur's Bane style cards in combat. Though sometimes that's the correct thing to do. 16. Targeting wrong stronghold on final turn. Always weigh up your options. What's more important isn't the size of your army, but the difference between the size of your army and the opponents. Yeah, so I lose a lot of games as Shadow. I mean, I'd say I'm a pretty solid Shadow player for the most part, but I've definitely lost games in the final round where you've got to pick a target. You've only got 1 or 2 dice left, and you've only got to choose which one you want to send the Witch King to try and get the final 2 victory points, get over the line, beat your opponent. And I think in this game it was like Erebor or Helm's Deep. And maybe I chose Erebor because I had a huge army there. or the vice versa. Maybe I had chosen, but I didn't discount. But the opponent also had a big army, so they could A, do more hits against me, and B, you know, you have to consider what types of cards they might have available to them. So if you're going for Rohan, there's a chance that they have Ent cards, and Ent cards are some of the most powerful military cards in the game. So if you're coming up against Huon Dark and an Ent's Rage, your big stack can melt rather quickly if the rolls don't go your way, especially if you don't have strong cards to counter those cards. So yeah, think about the difference in size of army and the nature of the target you're going up against. Another typical thing is if you're going up against a Gandhi army, then you've got to reevaluate everything. If you don't have any good, strong anti-Gandhi cards, you're trying to roll 6s on 5 dice while they're hitting, you know, 5 dice against you. Like that can, you know, if you've played enough of this game, you've seen Gandalf survive in insane circumstances because his power is so strong. Moving attacking army to Fords of Bruinen rather than Trollshaws when going for Rivendell. Always go Trollshaws. Yes, this is a game quite relatively recent in the World Tournament that I was playing against Mikkel, who's an excellent player. And I'm not sure if this cost me the game, but I was here, and this swine was here, and I was trying to get Rivendell under siege. And just because of like force of habit, because of where the hobbits go when you reveal the Fellowship, you always reveal them in Fords of Bruinen if they're hit once, unless you're, I don't know, playing Warriors of Middle-earth and you're going for the Western way. So I just, out of like muscle memory, moved my army here. And then what he did is he moved here, and then because he then moved first next turn, he got his dude in there, and it meant that I could barely take down Rivendell. I think I don't think it lost me the game, but it was certainly a factor in me losing the game. So yeah, like, just move the army into Trollshaws. It's not hard. Just move them there. Don't move them here. Simple little thing to do. But yeah, stuff like that can, like, this game is such fine margins. You can lose to games and things like that. Forgetting an offensive free people's army isn't at war. Usually elves or the north. Yeah, I've done this before. Sometimes you get so caught up because, like, when the free people's player starts like looking like a genuine military threat, you can almost, I've seen it happen quite a lot. Even quite experienced players can get very overly defensive. Actually, they can get really in their heads and start like, I mean, and it's good to be defensive in this situation. You want to make sure that you have your bases covered and that you can't get caught with your pants down by a through a day and a night into Morannon, and then suddenly you're like, oh crap, now I've got to play the game as if, you know, a free people's ability image could happen at any point. But sometimes, like, I'm thinking about, oh, can I attack into Osgiliath with when, you know, if I do it, they can walk into, like, one attack into Osgiliath, they might not even be, they might still be 2 steps away from war. Especially in like the mid to late game. Often in the mid game, like, it's very common that both Gondor and the elves are at war, which is why this came up. It must have been a game where I just assumed in like turn 8 that Gondor must be at war, and I was planning all my, like, you know, oh, there's a big army with Boromir and Aragorn, and I'm like thinking about, oh crap, if he plays through a day and a night, he can go in. But then I realized Gondor's not even at war, and I've just been like wasted 2 or 3 dice defending when it wasn't even a remote possibility of Gondor being a threat. And the same thing can happen with the elves, because it's very, very common that the elves are the first nation to go to war. But in the odd game, they don't go to war, and you're kind of thinking, oh crap, if they come into Moria, I've got to worry about defending Moria. If you've gone for Rivendell, or you've sent this army somewhere else. But if they're not at war, they can't do it. So it's a bit of a rare thing, but it has actually caught me off guard, made me maybe make little mistakes. Number 19, going for Lorien in Loam. This is straight off the back of my game against Finale, where there are times to go for Lorien in Loam. I was just being a little bit tongue-in-cheek here. But don't forget. I mean, the annoying thing was that, like, I knew this was a thing, very obviously, before I then made the mistake. But never, ever forget. Never forget how hellish Lorien is in Lords of Middle-earth if you can't take it out quickly and swiftly, and there's no, you know, and they get Galadriel into play. It's hell. It's the worst thing ever. It sucks, and it will punish you. So yeah, be careful. Be careful out there, people. Okay, now this is non-losing errors. This again, they're things that didn't lose me games, but that I thought were worthy enough to write down. Inefficient use of Shadow's Gather. Don't be afraid to move big armies from Gondor Rohan if you have sufficient cover and need to get over the line. I mean, that seems like an obvious one from Gondor or Rohan. Yeah, I just think maybe I wasn't considering every possibility of using Shadow's Gather. That's all I can think of there. I mean, it goes without saying, it's one of the most powerful cards in the whole game. And just being efficient with it can be hugely important. So yeah, don't waste Shadow's Gather. Make sure you think about using it well. Not finishing off a stronghold as Shadow when there's a big army nearby. Even if your army shrinks, it's worth it for the +6 defensive bonus and wasting enemy dice. So yeah, this can be a case where, for example, you've got Minas Tirith under siege, and it's down to like, let's say it's down to like, I don't know, like 2 guys left or something like that. And you got your big stack on it. And for whatever reason, you don't finish it off there and then. Maybe you don't have good cards to cycle. Maybe it just doesn't feel like the time is right. Maybe you just get distracted. Whatever. But there's a big army growing in Rohan. You know, maybe there's a big army in Fold or something like that. In the specific instance I'm describing here is often when you go for an early Helm's Deep as Shadow, you often go for it with quite a small army. So let's say we've got like this against... Yeah, this is a better example. Say you've got like this situation here. You didn't quite finish them off, but then you wait just a little bit too long, and the Rohan are able to attack into... Being attacked into in a field battle is so much worse. So much worse than just getting into the safety of the stronghold. It means that you're vulnerable to help unlooked for, which is pretty much guaranteed that you're going to have to then scamper away, or very likely you're going to have to scamper away, especially if there's more than one guy in Helm's Deep. It means that, you know, you're rolling on 5s against you, so this army can get decimated much more quickly. Just if you can kill, even if it doesn't feel good, maybe you've only got like a tiny little army left, it's still worth going for the kill and trying to take down the stronghold. Because once you're inside, the amount of dice that the free people are going to have to use to take that back is going to really waste their time. It gets you up to 2 victory points, obviously, which is like, you know, amazing. But the amount of dice they have to, you know, it's expensive for the free people. For the free people attacking into strongholds is so expensive for their dice economy. They have to start using character dice to do it often, Wills of the West to do it, because otherwise they're only relying on hybrids, which are relatively, you know, it's only a 1 in 6. They actually roll a hybrid. So, yeah, just getting inside the stronghold is crucial, so crucial for Shadow. Yep, and especially for removing the threat of help unlooked for, which is a hugely powerful card. Not playing War Messiah Toil. Even if Fellowship is thin, it's a great way to kill good cards like Mithras, Bilbo Song, etc. Yeah, so sometimes, you know, the Fellowship will get into Mordor, and you draw War Messiah Toil late game, and there's only like two guys left in the Fellowship, maybe 3, something like that, and you might think, is it even worth playing War Messiah Toil at this stage, at this late stage in the game? Yeah, it is. Yeah, you really should. Even sometimes if there's just one guy left in the Fellowship, provided it's not a Hobbit who will dodge it. But yeah, just sniping Mithril Coat or Bilbo Song is potentially game winning. You know, Mithril Coat is so hugely powerful for the free people in Mordor. So even if it's like, you know, it's only a 50% chance or a 33% chance of hitting it, if you know you're going to get at least one shot to play War Messiah Toil, ideally 2 or 3, still very powerful, very powerful. So don't just discount it because it's, you know, it's better in the early game, but it still can be very strong in the mid game, late game. Discarding / playing Vital Shadow mustering cards, e.g. Musterlings of a Long Plan War, which is the one that musters in Mordor, for their combat effects in a free People's Military Victory game. Also, not holding forward mustering cards. Yeah, so when you're playing as a Shadow in a game where the free military victory becomes a genuine threat, you have to really, again, like reevaluate the value of certain cards. Mustlings of a long plan war, I think it's normally a desperate battle. In like, 90% of games, you just use it as a desperate battle because that's a great card to take down strongholds. As soon as free military victory is a big army up here, Aragorn's involved and lots of musterings happening, and maybe you're a little bit short in Mordor because you've gone scampering up to the Dew line. Suddenly, Musterlings takes on like a whole new value. Equally, the forward mustering cards, i.e., Hill Trolls, Ologhai, and what's the other one? Half Orcs and Goblin Men. They also have a heightened value. So, if you get a sense that the free people might get a bit desperate, if you're like, it can even be a game where you're winning comfortably and you're doing pretty well. But if you get a sense of like, oh, it's kind of like a dog that's been, is suddenly gonna jump and attack. You gotta make sure to muzzle it by holding on to those cards so that when it does bite, you're prepared and you've got something up your sleeve to protect you. You can often tell or get a sense from where the free people are likely to go. So another one is actually Shadows on the Misty Mountains. Very, very powerful offensive cards. Build up forces in Moria. But if it's kind of mid to late game, and one of the only ways back into the game is for like a mad attack from Lorien into Moria, yeah, hold on to that card. Orcs multiply again, hold on to it. Hill Trolls, hold on to it. Pits of Mordor. These are all amazingly useful defensive cards in a free People's Military Victory game. Not checking discarded cards in a free People's Military Victory game. Some cards are game changers, and you need to know if your opponent still has them. Yeah, so I spent a whole game once playing around Path of the Woses when my opponent had already played Path of the Woses, and I think I did even check. Either I checked and I didn't look closely enough, or I misremembered, or I just was just not thinking straight. And that can waste like 2 dice. You can moving dudes around to try and cover all of these bases, and you can get in your own head about cards like that. Same goes for Dead Men, Through a Day and a Night. These are like 3 of the cards that can really change the shape of a game that Shadow is very far ahead in, or looking like they're going to get a comfortable victory. A well-timed Dead Man, a well-timed Through a Day and a Night. And equally, like, I've tried to be super clever and done all these plays to block Through a Day and a Night when it's already been played, and I've forgotten about it. So, yeah, just keep an eye on those cards. Use this function if you don't know about it. Click on the discarded cards function. You can see what cards have already been played, at least the ones that have been visible. Yeah, something to bear in mind. Putting the Witch King in the wrong army. Yeah. Definitely think carefully about where you want to put the Witch King when you bring the Witch King in. It can have a really big impact on the game. A classic one is it's very common for the Shadow to try and do kind of a pincer attack on Woodland Realm and Lorien at the same time to minimize the amount of mustering that the free people can do. If you do this, it's usually then that the elves are put to war and you can muster the Witch King. Where do you put the Witch King? Do you put him in Lorien? Do you put him in Woodland Realm? Always depends on the context of the game. In some cases, if Lorien's looking tough, you might want to put him in Woodland Realm. Maybe you can then take the whole of the Dew line and you just keep the Witch King in here, and you take down 5 victory points, do lots of card cycling in one fell swoop. You don't need to move all the Nazgul around. That's great. In other games, because Lorien has 2 very powerful cards to defend it in Celeborn's Galadrim and a Power 2 Great. So often you want to just wipe Lorien off the face of the map early, cycle cards there, and then move on. So yeah, it depends on the context of the game somewhat, but yeah, putting the Witch King in the wrong army can be again, can really slow you down. And if you stop drawing character dice later on, it can also be quite awkward. So yeah, make sure that you give some thought into where you put the Witch King. Playing a tile drawing card when Gandhi is in the Fellowship and the Fellowship has a will. Yeah, so this is something that, again, like, I'm surprised this is like number 7 because I thought this is something I wouldn't have done for a long time. But yeah, you almost never want to play a tile drawing card when Gandhi's there, because then what you can do is accidentally kill Gandhi and then give the Fellowship a massive leg up by allowing them to get Gandalf the White. So yeah, there's definitely early game killing Gandalf is not always a good thing at all. Often a very bad thing, especially if the Free Peels player is holding a will. So I'm surprised I even did that. I feel like that's something I would have drilled out of my system in very, very early on. But yeah, just be careful. If Gandalf is somehow still alive mid game, don't forget and think, oh, and just at that point you should be giving up on corruption and you should be going full hardcore military, because if Gandhi's still alive and around here, you're very, very, very unlikely to win a corruption game. And last but not least, forgetting about Day Without Dawn. Duh. Yep. I think it's no surprise that I lose a lot of my games because of mistakes I make in probably the last, when I've been playing for like over an hour, over 90 minutes. That it's that final stretch. And at that point, your brain is often quite tired. You're more susceptible to miss things. And in this case, I forgot Day Without Dawn. I forgot that I had it in my hand, and I'm guessing the Free People rolled a bunch of wills. I forgot to use it, which is just so annoying. But yeah, I don't know what the solution is for that. Just because a lot of this is just forgetting stuff. Maybe like go for a bathroom break when the Free People player gets into Mordor, and just splash some water in your face. Have a drink of water or something like that. Or just don't play when you're tired, which is often because I've got a young son. It's quite hard to play War of the Ring when I'm not tired. So maybe that's why I'm not a really top player. Yeah, that must be why. That's definitely why. Cool. Well, hopefully that was useful for everybody, and hopefully see you on the server, on the Discord server. Cheers for watching. Bye-bye. Like and subscribe, people. I'm going to become a whore for YouTube. Like and subscribe.